You've found nightfall murmurs. When day fades into silence, the world begins to whisper. Some stories come as murmurs, some as warnings, but they all come at night. Don't be afraid to listen, but never listen alone. The first whispers slithering through the hollow shell of Mercywood Asylum were the precise moment dread crystallized in my gut, a profound, irreversible error acknowledged. What began as a pilgrimage for my particular obsession, the allure of urban decay, metamorphosed into a terror that clings to me still, a persistent shadow lengthening across my days. My name is Leo, a chronicler of forgotten spaces, drawn for years to the skeletal remains of civilization, camera my constant companion against the silence and dust. I'd navigated dozens of derelict structures, monuments to entropy, yet none whispered warnings like Mercywood. A behemoth sprawled on the city's fringe, Mercywood had languished, sealed off for more than a decade, its grandeur succumbing to rot. To explorers like me, it was the promised land. 5 tiers of disintegrating corridors, spectral operating theaters, and secrets veiled in plaster dust and neglect. Months I'd plotted this incursion, awaiting the perfect shroud of a moonless night. Breaching its perimeter felt almost anticlimactic. A warped plank beside a ground floor window yielded with a groan, admitting me into the stale, thick air. Decay possessed a unique perfume here, heavy and cloying. My flashlight's beam sliced the oppressive dark, illuminating walls shedding paint like sunburnt skin, and the ghostly silhouettes of abandoned medical apparatus. For an hour, the descent into ruin was intoxicating, precisely the desolate beauties I craved. My lens captured an old nursery, its viewing window miraculously intact, vacant bassinets ranked like miniature tombs. I discovered patient records spilled across an office floor, brittle paper disintegrating beneath my cautious touch. Within the cavernous cafeteria, metal trays remained stacked, poised for phantom meals on eternally postponed schedules. It was on the 3rd floor, amidst the unsettling quiet of what appeared to have been the psychiatric wing, that the silence fractured. A voice, faint yet undeniably human, drifted from the levels above. I froze, my pulse a frantic drum against my ribs. Imagination surely. The wind sighing through broken panes. Then it came again, doubled now. A man, a woman, their exchange sharp, serrated with anger. Too distant for precise words, but the venom in their tones was unmistakable. Every primal instinct screamed retreat, urged me back towards the warped plank, the car, the safety of the mundane world. Yet a treacherous curiosity, the explorer's fatal flaw, held me fast. Perhaps fellow trespassers, I rationalized, or vagrants seeking refuge in the asylum's upper reaches. Regardless, the mystery demanded investigation. I ascended the stairwell, each creak of the aged timber underfoot, an agony of indiscretion. The voices swelled, gaining clarity as I reached the 4th floor landing. They emanated from behind imposing double doors, scarred metal identifying them. Operating theater. Pressing my ear flat against the cold metal, the words finally resolved. "We can't sustain this, Silas," the woman's voice hissed, taut with anxiety. "Someone will notice." "Calm yourself," the man, Silas, countered, his voice laced with dismissal. This ruin has been our sanctuary for months. Nobody ventures here. But the risk, what if someone does? What if... Then, he interrupted, his voice hardening. We handle it, the way we always handle complications. Ice traced a path down my spine. Squatters? Explorers? No. Whatever clandestine activity unfolded behind those doors carried a weight far heavier, far more dangerous. Escape became imperative, immediate. I pivoted, but my hurried movement betrayed me. A metal instrument tray, balanced precariously on a nearby gurney, tumbled, striking the concrete floor with a clang that reverberated through the asylum's hollow bones like a gunshot. Instant silence descended from behind the doors. Then, hurried footfalls pounded towards me. Raw panic flooded my system. I bolted, abandoning stealth, sprinting down the corridor, the sound of my own flight echoing wildly. Behind me, the double doors slammed open. "Hey, you! Stop!" I ran with a speed fueled by sheer terror, devouring the stairs downwards, 2, 3 at a time. Their pursuit was relentless, their steps gaining. Rounding a bend on the second floor, a hand snagged my jacket. I wrenched free, the tearing sound of fabric a visceral punctuation mark to my escape. I burst through the same compromised window I'd used for entry, stumbling onto the overgrown, neglected lawn. My car, secreted a block away beneath concealing trees, felt miles distant. Reaching it felt like an eternity compressed into seconds, keys fumbling in my trembling grasp as indistinct shouts pursued me through the night air. As I fishtailed away from the curb, my rearview mirror captured 2 figures spilling from the asylum's maw. Even across the distance, a metallic gleam flashed in the man's hand. Unmistakably, a gun. Hours blurred into an endless drive. Fear a co-pilot refusing sleep. Every pair of headlights blooming in my mirror ignited fresh panic. Only the pale dawn filtering through the windshield permitted me to finally pull into a desolate rest stop, hands quivering as I killed the engine. What abyss had I peered into? Narcotics? Something darker? Trafficking in illicit goods or worse? Whatever the truth, I was drowning, far out of my depth. The police? The thought flickered, then died. Trespassing felon overhears suspicious argument. It sounded flimsy, pathetic. And Silas's confidence, using this place for months, hinted at an impunity that chilled me further. Connections? Perhaps. I opted for obscurity, calling in sick, entombing myself in my apartment, desperately trying to believe they hadn't clocked me, my car, my existence. But the quiet was illusory. Subtle disturbances began to prickle my awareness. Objects in my apartment shifted fractionally from where I'd left them. My laptop log showed activity I couldn't account for. Twice, venturing out for essentials, the same nondescript sedan seemed tethered to my route. Paranoia took root, blooming into a suffocating vine. Sleep offered no refuge, shredded by phantom noises. The phone went unanswered, emails unread. Friends expressed concern, voices distant, unable to penetrate the wall of fear I'd erected. How could I articulate this self-inflicted catastrophe? A week crawled by, each day longer than the last. Then, returning home, I found my apartment door hanging slightly open. My heart hammered against my ribs as I nudged it wider. Chaos greeted me. Drawers disgorged their contents, furniture lay overturned, violated. Yet nothing tangible seemed absent. except laid precisely on my kitchen table was a single sheet of paper. On it, penned in disturbingly neat script, a message that turned my blood to ice. "We know who you are. We know where you live. Stay silent, or our next visit won't be just observation." That was the fracture point. A duffel bag hastily stuffed, my bank account drained, the highway beckoning. I drove until geography blurred, sleeping fitfully in the car, cash transactions my only footprint. My phone, credit cards, any tether to my former life, severed. 3 months have bled away since that night in Mercywood's shadow. I exist now in a nameless small town, adrift by thousands of miles, washing dishes under an assumed name. Dyed hair, a beard, futile attempts at camouflage. Safety remains an illusion. Every unfamiliar face entering the diner might be theirs. Every lingering car could be surveillance. Nightmares are frequent visitors, replaying the frantic chase, the glint of steel. Running cannot be perpetual. This knowledge sits heavy in my chest. Eventually, confrontation seems inevitable. Perhaps the FBI, a full confession laid bare. But for now, survival dictates motion, constant vigilance. My days exploring the beauty of decay are irrevocably over. The thrill has curdled into a bitter understanding of the dangers concealed within those forgotten corners. Some secrets, I've learned with brutal finality, carry a lethal weight. Some doors are best left sealed. As I commit these words to paper in a cramped, anonymous room, the fragility of normalcy astounds me. One impulsive decision, one step into forbidden territory, and the entire edifice of a life can crumble. Let this chronicle serve as a stark warning to any soul tempted by the siren song of derelict places. You cannot fathom what truly stirs in the darkness. Sometimes, the most terrifying specters aren't echoes of the past, but tangible threats lurking in the neglected present, fiercely guarding secrets the world thought it had buried. So, should you ever feel the pull towards that broken window, that chained door, remember Leo. Remember the price of forbidden knowledge. Remember that in the realm of urban exploration, the deadliest ghosts are often flesh and blood, hiding in plain sight within the places society has abandoned. A violent lurch of the carriage sent a ripple through the near-empty space, and their heads, all three, snapped rearward with the eerie precision of marionettes. That singular, unified motion snagged my attention, a dissonant chord in the familiar rhythm of the late-night Amtrak pilgrimage from Boston toward the yawning maw of New York. This iron serpent, the 1145, was practically a second home, yet tonight felt alien. From my customary seat, third row from the aft bulkhead, exhaustion blurring the edges of the world after a day steeped in corporate jargon, I watched them. Overhead, fluorescents sputtered, painting their faces in strobes of sickly light and fleeting shadow. They occupied the car's desolate far end, statuesque, save for those jarring, synchronized reactions to the train's shuddering progress. My phone cast a pale glow. 1:17 a.m. Outside Providence, the wheels sang their relentless metallic lullaby against the rails, a sound amplified by the carriage's hollow quiet. Besides myself and the trio, only a slumbering couple near the car's midpoint broke the emptiness. I tried wrestling my focus back to the laptop's sterile screen, but my gaze kept migrating, drawn by an unseen current to the figures. 2 men, 1 woman, draped in the somber uniformity of business attire. Their posture defied fatigue, spines unnaturally straight, shoulders set at identical, severe angles. When the train swayed on a curve, they shifted not as individuals, but as a single, interconnected entity, tethered by invisible threads. A chill, unrelated to the air conditioning, crept into my palms, slicking the keyboard. Paranoia, I chided myself. Just tired travelers. Mind your own screen. Then one turned its head. Not a human turn, fluid and casual, but a sharp, ratcheting click, like a mechanism locking into place. Its gaze found mine, pinning me instantly. The face, sculpted in human lines, felt profoundly wrong. The eyes were voids, polished obsidian beads reflecting the flickering light without a hint of life or the decency of a blink. The surrounding skin possessed a porcelain perfection, too flawless, too taut. My stomach coiled. I wrenched my stare back to the meaningless pixels on my screen, heart hammering a frantic tattoo against my ribs. A film of sweat bloomed on my brow, cold in the conditioned air. A primal urge screamed to flee, to find another car, but my limbs felt like lead anchors. The train began its decelerating groan, bleeding speed as we neared the next station. Footsteps, deliberate and measured, approached down the aisle. I kept my head bowed, pretending intense focus. A hand clamped onto my shoulder, fingers biting strong and insistent through my shirt. Don't show surprise. Don't look their way. When we stop, you're leaving with me. The voice was a low, urgent rasp beside my ear. I risked a fractional turn of my head. A man, perhaps mid-50s, peered down, his face etched with weariness, grey hair severely cropped beneath a battered leather jacket. His grip didn't lessen. "What?" I breathed, the sound swallowed by the carriage's hum. He cut me off. "Their movements betray them. They aren't constructed like us. You saw it, didn't you? The lack of grace. Stay aboard this train, and Penn Station becomes a destination you'll never reach." Slowing. Through the grime-streaked window, the sparse lights of Kingston Station swam into view. My thoughts fragmented, racing. This stranger, a potential threat himself? Yet his voice held a conviction born of sheer terror, a certainty that resonated deep in my bones. I risked a glance towards the far end. The trio was now upright, gliding into the aisle with that same unnerving synchronous flow. Their motion was liquid, yes, but flawed, like a film reel running at an imperfect speed. "Now!" the stranger hissed, hauling me bodily from my seat. Instinctively, I snatched my laptop bag. My suitcase remained, a forgotten relic in the overhead rack. As we propelled toward the exit, I heard their footfalls echo ours, gaining speed, still falling in perfect, chilling unison. The train hadn't quite kissed the platform when the stranger yanked the emergency release. A blast of frigid night air assaulted us as he shoved me toward the gaping doorway. "Jump!" Thought evaporated. Reflex took over. My boots struck gravel, momentum tumbling me across the uneven ground. The stranger landed beside me, pulling me upright with rough efficiency. "Run!" We scrambled away from the tracks, sprinting towards the spectral emptiness of the station platform. Behind us, a sound unlike human landings. 3 distinct impacts merging into a single resonant thud. Heavy, metallic against stone. "Don't turn around," the stranger gasped, breath tearing from his lungs. "Whatever happens, keep your eyes forward. Don't see their faces now. Lungs burning, we pounded across the vacant platform, bursting into the station building itself. Inside, fluorescent tubes buzzed with an aggressive hum in the profound silence. A station agent, drowsy and screen-lit, glanced up incuriously as we stormed in. "Lock down!" the stranger commanded, voice raw. "Call the authorities!" The agent blinked, bewildered. I spun, compelled to look back through the glass doors, and froze. They were advancing across the platform, a phalanx of perfect gliding motion. And their faces, bile surged into my throat. The skin wasn't skin anymore. It was translucent, waxy, catching the station lights like flawed mirrors. The stranger yanked me down behind a hard plastic bench. "Stay low," he ordered, fumbling inside his jacket. He produced a small cylinder of dull metal, etched with unfamiliar symbols. The automatic door slid open with a pneumatic sigh. 3 pairs of feet stepped onto the tiled floor, their cadence precise, synchronized. Click, click, click. The sound reverberated. "What are they?" I whispered, the words catching in my dry throat. "Explanations are a luxury for the living," he retorted. The footsteps drew nearer. A faint, high-frequency whirring joined their advance, the sound of intricate machinery spooling up. The station agent, finally grasping the wrongness, pushed himself upright, mouth forming a question. "Down!" the stranger bellowed, too late. One of the figures lashed out, its arm extending with impossible speed and length, fingers elongating into metallic segmented tendrils. They closed around the agent's throat. He emitted a strangled cry. The stranger surged to his feet, aiming the metal cylinder. A piercing tone erupted, saturating the air, forcing the 3 figures to halt, heads swiveling towards us with that same horrifying clockwork precision. "Cover your ears!" the stranger yelled. He twisted a dial on the cylinder. The tone escalated, becoming a physical pressure, vibrating through bone and sinew. I clamped my hands over my ears, a futile gesture against the overwhelming sound. The figures began to shudder violently. Their waxy integument rippled, then tore like wet paper. Beneath lay something that choked the scream in my throat, a nightmare fusion of polished metal, bundled wires, and glistening pseudo-organic components, all writhing and shifting. The agent had collapsed, scrabbling backward as the tendrils released him. The 3 figures, things, were coming undone. Shreds of their human disguise sloughed off, revealing more of the monstrous clockwork beneath. The stranger held the cylinder steady, his arm rigid despite the tremors shaking his frame. The sonic pitch shifted again. The creature's movements turned spastic, their coordination shattering. They lurched toward us, limbs flailing disjointedly. One opened its mouth, revealing not teeth, but concentric rings of metal that spun outwards like a drill bit. A sound tore from it, neither human nor machine, a high-frequency screech that vibrated my teeth and blurred my vision. The overhead lights exploded in a shower of glass. In the sudden gloom, punctuated by emergency lighting, I saw arcs of blue energy crackle across their exposed mechanisms. They were disintegrating, pieces clattering onto the tiled floor. "Behind me!" the stranger commanded, stepping forward cautiously. He kicked aside a fallen piece, a hand, its metallic fingers still twitching, grasping at his boot. The creatures executed one final synchronized spasm, heads snapping back at an anatomically impossible angle. Then they collapsed entirely. a heap of sparking, inert components scattered across the floor. The debilitating sound from the cylinder ceased, leaving only a ringing silence and the whimpering of the station agent huddled in a corner. Emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows. "What?" My voice was a croak. "What were those?" The stranger, Corbin, was already moving, producing another device from his jacket. Small, black, resembling a remote control. He aimed it at the scattered debris. Smoke began to rise as the components sizzled and melted into viscous, dark pools. "Hunters," he said finally, his gaze fixed on the dissolving remains. "Tracking transit systems, trains, buses, anywhere they can blend, isolate prey. They mimic humanity, but the fine motor control, it's flawed. The tells are there if you know how to look." "Hunting what?" I asked, though a cold dread had already supplied the answer. "Us." He turned, his expression stark in the dim light. "They abduct, study, refine the imitation. These were an older model, the newer iterations, harder to distinguish." The station agent, fumbling with his phone, had managed to dial. Corbin strode over, flashing some form of identification I couldn't clearly make out. "Federal oversight," he stated, his tone shifting to one of smooth authority. "This incident is classified. Containment team en route for cleanup and debriefing. This station is under temporary restriction." The agent nodded, numb, lowering his phone. Corbin returned to me. "The immediate threat is neutralized, but you need to come with me. There are protocols. We need to ensure you weren't tagged." My eyes scanned the scene, the liquefying puddles, the shattered glass, the scorch marks marring the walls. 15 minutes had irrevocably fractured my reality. "Why me? Why save me?" "Because you saw," he said simply. "Most people rationalize the inconsistencies, dismiss the wrongness. You didn't. That makes you vulnerable, or valuable." He gestured toward the exit. "Your choice?" I glanced back through the glass doors toward the tracks. Far in the distance, the train's taillights dwindled, swallowed by the night. If I hadn't jumped. "Yes," I said, pushing myself to my feet and following him. "I'm coming." Outside, the night air bit, clean and cold, beneath a canopy of indifferent stars scattered across the ink-black sky. Corbin led me to an unmarked black SUV parked in the otherwise deserted lot. "Safe house nearby, less than an hour," he said, unlocking the doors remotely. "We'll talk en route, but first tell me precisely, what was the very first thing that registered as wrong?" I cast my mind back to the train car, the subtle yet jarring discord. "Their heads," I replied. "The jolt of the train. They reacted simultaneously, like puppets pulled by the same string." He nodded, starting the engine, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness. "Observant. We need that." "Need it for what?" "The resistance," he said, the words spoken with quiet gravity. "Because their mimicry improves daily, and fewer humans possess the instinct to recognize the counterfeit anymore." As we pulled out of the lot, flashing blue and red lights appeared in the distance. Unmarked vehicles converging, the Erasure Squad arriving to sanitize reality. 1,000 questions buzzed in my head, but silence felt more appropriate for the moment. I watched the dark ribbon of road unwind before us. My life had pivoted on its axis in that train car, hinged on the moment I noticed 3 passengers moving incorrectly. Now everything seemed suspect. The way shadows clung to buildings, the gait of a distant figure, glimpsed under a streetlight, the world was suddenly riddled with potential anomalies. Corbin, I didn't even know his real name, drove with focused intensity, his eyes periodically flicking to the rearview mirror. Fear should have been my dominant emotion, a demand for answers tearing at my throat. Instead, a strange sense of clarity settled over me, as if I'd been sleepwalking and had only just been jolted awake. "Try to rest," he advised, his voice low. "Tomorrow the education begins. How to see them, how to counter them, how to survive." I leaned my head against the cool window, but my eyes remained open, scanning the fleeting landscape of darkened houses and empty fields. How much else was a facade? The world looked identical, yet felt fundamentally altered. Now I understood. That prickling sense of unease, the feeling that something is subtly, disturbingly off, isn't always imagination. Sometimes the monsters are real, masters of camouflage hiding in plain sight. The SUV devoured the miles, carrying us deeper into the night, further from the contaminated station, and into a clandestine world I never knew existed beneath the veneer of the ordinary. Behind us, the night train continued its inexorable journey toward New York, and I couldn't help but wonder how many other passengers might notice something moving wrong, and if any of them would be lucky enough to be pulled from the path before it was too late. Twin beams from my weary Plymouth carved a hesitant path through the inkwell black of the highway, a ribbon unfurling into infinity. My knuckles bleached against the worn vinyl of the steering wheel, a silent plea for the machine to endure. Just a handful more miles, a desperate mantra. But destiny, indifferent, charted a different course. With a terminal shudder and a gasp of metal, the engine surrendered. Its lifeblood ceased, and I drifted onto the gravel shoulder, the encompassing void swallowing the car whole. "Not now, please, not now," I whispered, twisting the ignition key with futile hope. A strangled whine answered, then silence. Defeated, I leaned back, the starkness of my predicament crystallizing. Ilara Vance, 28 years adrift, marooned on the desolate expanse of Route 41. My watch face glowed dimly. 11:43 p.m. My fingers sought the cold comfort of my phone, the contemporary talisman against isolation. The screen offered a cruel jest. A single, ephemeral bar flickered, a dying star. I stabbed at the emergency number regardless, a prayer cast into the electronic ether. 911, state your emergency. A voice thin and fractured by static emerged. My vehicle, it stalled. Route 41, I managed, battling the tremor in my voice. I'm alone. It's completely dark. Can someone come? Your precise location, ma'am? I scanned the oppressive darkness beyond the windows, searching for any distinguishing feature in the homogeneous landscape. I can't be certain. The last marker indicated Millbrook, perhaps 20 minutes past. Understood. Dispatching a patrol unit to sweep the vicinity. It may require some time. Are you able to remain with your vehicle? Yes, I confirmed, my throat constricting. How long, roughly? Given the remoteness, potentially an hour, is there anyone nearby you could contact? Images of my stark apartment, the ghosts of friendships sacrificed for this new beginning, flickered through my mind. No. I breathed. No one. The call ended, leaving a silence heavier than before, amplifying my solitude. Far across the median, the occasional fleeting rush of headlights served only to underscore the profound emptiness on my side of the divide. I lowered the window a fraction, inviting the cool night air. An unsettling symphony arose, the incessant chirring of crickets, the sibilant whisper of wind through roadside sentinels of grass. Then, a distant glimmer blossomed in the rearview mirror. Headlights swelled, approaching from the void behind me. A surge of fragile hope coursed through me. Perhaps the patrol, arriving with unexpected swiftness. The vehicle decelerated as it drew near. I shielded my eyes against the sudden glare. Not law enforcement. An old pickup, battered and indistinct. It crept past, a spectral leviathan moving far beneath the dictated pace, its windows darkly impenetrable. A prickle of disquiet traced my spine as it continued onward. Just being cautious, I reasoned aloud, the sound startlingly loud in the confined space, seeing if I needed assistance. Yet it hadn't paused. Its crimson tail lights dwindled, consumed by the horizon. I exhaled a breath I hadn't known I was holding. Minutes crawled with excruciating lethargy. My attention oscillated between the mocking screen of my phone, the signal stubbornly absent, and the vacant stretch of road ahead and behind. Headlights materialized again in the mirror. My heart gave a hopeful leap, instantly plummeting as the familiar silhouette resolved itself. The pickup. It was returning. As before, it slowed, gliding closer. This time, however, it eased to a halt some 50 feet astern. Its headlights remained fiercely lit, pinning my car in their stark white interrogation. I sat frozen, hands knotted tightly in my lap. Why this distance? Why the silent observation? Seconds distended into unbearable minutes. The truck remained immobile, inert, offering no clue to the driver's intent. Only those relentless beams holding me captive, an exhibit under glass. My breath hitched. Should I risk exiting? Make some gesture? The locks were engaged, yet the car suddenly felt less like refuge, more like a cage. After an age measured in heartbeats, the truck's engine growled. It swung wide, executing a slow arc around my disabled Plymouth. In the brief moment it passed alongside, I glimpsed the driver, a dark form, head angled unnervingly towards me. No features were discernible. Then it accelerated, vanishing once more into the night, leaving me plunged back into profound darkness. My pulse hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "It's fine, perfectly fine," I insisted to the empty passenger seat, the forced reassurance ringing hollow. "Just checking, twice, without offering help. Absolutely standard procedure." A shaky laugh escaped me. My watch indicated only 20 minutes had elapsed since the 911 call. It felt like eons. Seeking distraction, I rummaged blindly in my handbag, discarded gum wrappers, the jingle of loose coins, a crumpled tissue packet. My fingers brushed against cold, hard plastic, the pepper spray my father had pressed upon me. I drew it out, its weight a small, tangible anchor in the sea of anxiety. A new sound permeated the night air, a low, persistent hum. I looked up, hope and dread entwined within me. Headlights, again, but not the flashing blues and reds I craved. The pickup truck had returned. This time, it pulled directly behind me. so close its grille filled the mirror, erasing the world behind me. The intense beams bored through the rear window, flooding the cabin with blinding light. Squinting, I tried vainly to pierce the glare and see the occupant, but saw only that opaque shape. My grip tightened convulsively on the pepper spray. What was happening? Why this silent siege? The driver's side door creaked open. I held my breath, every muscle taut. A boot appeared on the running board, followed by a denim-clad leg. The driver was emerging. My trembling hand fumbled for the phone. Still dead. That lone bar had surrendered completely. The figure stepped fully into view. Tall, broad-shouldered, undeniably male. He paused for a moment, caught in the stark backlight of his own vehicle, then began walking towards my car. My thoughts scattered like startled birds. Attempt escape? The engine was lifeless, but perhaps momentum. No, the road lay too level. I'd never gain speed. He was halfway to my window. I couldn't discern his expression, couldn't tell if his gaze was fixed on me, yet I felt his scrutiny like a physical pressure. 10 feet, 5. He stopped directly beside my door. I clutched the pepper spray, thumb hovering over the trigger. My other hand rested near the horn. Any hostile move, and I'd unleash the spray, lean on the horn, shatter the silence. Someone would hear. Someone must. We remained locked in a tense tableau, myself rigid within, him looming without. I braced for him to speak, to test the handle, to act. Instead, he simply stood there, watching, waiting. A single drop of sweat traced a cold path down my spine. Then, glacially slow, he lifted a hand. I flinched, poised to react. He knocked 2 sharp raps against the glass. "Everything all right in there, miss?" His voice, when it came, was unexpectedly ordinary. Hoarse, perhaps, but lacking overt menace. Thrown off balance, I blinked. Yes, I stammered, projecting my voice through the barrier. "Car trouble, waiting for assistance." He nodded, taking a slight step back. With the blinding light no longer directly behind him, I could see him more clearly. Older, maybe 60s, face etched by time and weather, a simple cap pulled low. "Saw you sitting here before," he stated. "Came back around, wanted to be sure you were okay. Can be risky, stranded alone like this." The adrenaline tide began to recede, leaving behind a residue of foolishness. A concerned passerby. My fear had painted a monster where perhaps only concern resided. "Thank you," I offered, mustering a wan smile. "I appreciate you stopping. The police should be arriving shortly." He nodded again. Good. Well, reckon I'll just wait here alongside till they show, if it's no bother. Wouldn't feel right leaving you." Before I could formulate a response, a new set of lights pierced the distant darkness. As they approached, the unmistakable profile of a patrol car, its light bar casting intermittent flashes, materialized. The old man turned, observed its arrival, then glanced back at me. "Looks like your help's here. You take care now, miss." He ambled back to his truck. Just as the cruiser pulled up and an officer emerged, the pickup truck rumbled away, melting back into the obscurity from which it had emerged. I lowered my window as the uniformed officer approached. "Ilara Vance?" he inquired. "Yes," I replied, relief washing over me in a dizzying wave. "Thank God you're here." While the officer radioed for a tow truck, my gaze drifted towards the point where the pickup had vanished. Had my terror been an overreaction? Possibly. Yet, recalling those elongated minutes of uncertainty, the unsettling orbits of the truck, the silent observation, a persistent unease lingered. Ultimately, the old man's true intentions, simple Samaritan or something shadowed, would remain an unsettling enigma. One truth, however, was undeniable. The sight of a deserted highway at night would forever be altered in my perception. Climbing into the relative safety of the patrol car to await the tow, I made a silent vow to have my Plymouth thoroughly inspected, and perhaps, just perhaps, to seriously reconsider that promising job offer back in the sprawling, congested city. Suddenly, the prospect of navigating rush hour seemed infinitely preferable. My affinity for the ossified gadgetry of yesteryear has long been a quiet passion, yet never did I anticipate one particular find, transforming the deep hours of night into an ordeal beyond bearing. It was a vintage wireless, hailing from some forgotten conflict, unearthed at an estate liquidation in a sleepy corner of the neighborhood. Initially, it struck me as merely substantial, its bakelite shell bearing a history etched in gouges and scrapes, paint flaking near its worn edges. An aroma of settled dust and cold, aged metal clung to it. I parted with more currency than usual, swayed by the seller's insistence on its historical significance. A conduit, he claimed, for clandestine transmissions by soldiers embroiled in an unnamed war. Dramatic, yes, but curiosity is its own currency. Back home, it found a niche upon a living room shelf, nestled between my hulking old film projector and a reel-to-reel deck whose time had long passed. For several days, it remained an inert presence. A single test confirmed its basic function. Plugged in, a twist of the tuning knob, a nudge of the volume dial yielded the familiar, comforting crackle of static from its speaker grill. Satisfied, I switched it off, the matter dismissed from my thoughts. Then, perhaps a week hence, the dead of night, precisely 3 a.m., was disturbed by a low, insistent hum. Drawn from my bedroom, I discovered the radio aglow, its dial lamps casting a sickly yellow luminescence. It was active. My heart hammered against my ribs. I distinctly recalled ensuring it was off before retiring. As I drew nearer, a sibilant susurrus emerged from the speaker. Not one voice, but many, a chaotic intertwining, rapid, almost desperate. Straining to decipher words proved futile, yielding only disjointed phonemes. My gaze locked onto the power switch. It remained firmly in the off position. A primal fear seized me. With trembling hands, I yanked the plug from the wall socket. The whispering ceased instantly. I stood there, a fine sheen of sweat prickling my skin despite the room's cool air, breathing deeply. A tremor ran through my hands, that telltale inner heat signaling the intrusion of the truly bizarre. Leaving the wireless unplugged, I retreated to bed, seeking refuge in the willful denial of sleep. The following day, logic offered flimsy reassurances, a loose connection, perhaps, or a faulty switch inherent in its age. I clung to the explanation of mechanical failure, yet the subsequent night brought recurrence. 3 a.m. My bedside clock blinked 3:07. The whispers returned, perceptibly louder this time. Though my bedroom door was shut, The source was unmistakable: the living room. Steeling myself, I emerged. The radio pulsed with light, the speaker disgorging that same overlapping vocal torrent. It wasn't mere noise now. Fragments coalesced, evoking the indistinct roar of a distant multitude. My pulse surged, a knot tightening in my neck. I made directly for the power cord, only to find it dangling uselessly from the disconnected plug. Still, the radio lived, broadcasting its spectral chorus. Instinctively, I seized the heavy chassis, giving it a futile shake. The static intensified, the voices swelling momentarily into a frantic shout before abruptly receding back to whispers. Amidst the crackle, sharp and clear, I heard it, my own given name, uttered by one voice within the fray. Then, utter silence. The dial light flickered once, extinguished. I remained rooted for a long minute, the frantic thudding in my chest echoing in the stillness. My breath felt thin, my throat parched. Hoisting the radio, I carried it swiftly to the kitchen, setting it upon the table, half expecting it to reanimate in my grasp. It stayed dark, inert. Sleep became a scarce commodity thereafter. The memory of the voices, my name plucked from the ether, replayed relentlessly. Was it hallucination, born of fatigue, a waking dream? The thought of summoning an electrician felt absurd. An unplugged device defied conventional explanation. Sharing the experience with anyone, even Leo, felt like inviting ridicule, a confession of encroaching madness. I attempted immersion in work, in routine. By daylight, the radio sat innocuously on the kitchen table, a harmless antique. But on the fifth night, the ritual resumed. 3 a.m. The familiar frantic murmuring seeped under my door. A cold dread coiled in my stomach, yet I forced myself upright. In the illuminated kitchen, the radio glowed. Its dial indicated some impossible frequency, caught between stations that likely no longer existed. The voices were a cacophony now, a blend of screams and urgent whispers clawing at the silence. Hesitantly, I reached for the tuning knob, my fingertips tingling with apprehension. The instant my skin made contact, the volume plunged. Out of the diminished static emerged a name, Leo's, then my supervisor's name, followed chillingly by my own once more. I froze, blood pounding in my temples, every instinct screaming flight. Yet I remained. Hello? The word emerged, thin and unsteady. A hiss of static answered, then dissolved, leaving a single voice, male, raspy, freighted with urgency. Go to the old warehouse on Maple Street. Silence crashed down. The light faded. Twisting the dial yielded nothing. Dead air. The remainder of that night was spent hunched on the sofa, thoughts cascading. The old Maple Street warehouse, a skeletal structure in a blighted sector of town, glimpsed occasionally from the car window, largely derelict. Sweat beaded on my forehead again. My heart refused its normal rhythm, a compulsion warred with self-preservation. Why there? The sheer irrationality was staggering. Yet the intimate knowledge, my name, Leo's, lent the transmission a terrifyingly personal weight. For a merciful couple of days, silence reigned. The radio sat on the kitchen table, an object I consciously avoided looking at directly. The volume knob remained at 0, a pointless gesture against its phantom power. Each night I lingered awake, braced for the inevitable, but the wireless stayed dormant. The urge to haul it outside, to consign it to the refuse bin, surfaced repeatedly. Yet each time the intention formed, a visceral wave of nausea washed over me. A dull ache would begin behind my eyes, the memory of those layered voices flooding back. Distractions, television, phone calls, proved ephemeral. The radio's presence lingered, a silent, brooding question. Was it fear of reprisal that stayed my hand? Or a morbid, burgeoning curiosity? I couldn't be certain. On the 8th night, punctually at 3:01 a.m., it stirred again. The initial crackle jolted me from a shallow doze on the couch, a recurring nightmare made manifest. Entering the kitchen, I found the radio already immersed in its lunatic broadcast. The speaker cone seemed to visibly tremble with the pressure of the multitudinous voices. My head throbbed. A low-frequency hum permeated the room, so potent I felt it vibrating in my teeth. I clenched my jaw against rising panic. Then, the cacophony subsided. A single voice emerged, deep, measured, slow. "Go there, don't wait." Nothing more. It was profoundly unsettling. I stood transfixed, staring at the radio as if it were a coiled serpent. Eventually, retreating to the living room couch, sleep remained elusive, the deep voice echoing in the hollows of my mind. Morning found me unrested, limbs heavy, eyes burning. Coffee did little to dispel the fog of exhaustion or the circling thoughts of the Maple Street warehouse. Daylight, I decided, offered a sliver of safety, a reconnaissance mission. Around noon, gripping the steering wheel with damp palms, I drove across town. Reaching Maple Street, the warehouse loomed behind a sagging chain-link fence, a study in urban decay. Graffiti scarred its brick walls, windows gaped like empty sockets. Nearby dumpsters overflowed with forgotten refuse. No vehicles, no signs of human activity. A rusted chain secured the main gate. Parking across the street, I watched for several minutes. Stillness, emptiness. I drove home, mind churning. What had I anticipated? A figure beckoning from the gate? A condemnation notice? The absence of anything was, in itself, unnerving. Back home, a hastily made sandwich did little to settle the disquiet. Forgetting seemed impossible. That evening, I sat in the living room, observing the radio from a distance. Still unplugged, I extinguished most of the apartment lights, hoping to catch its initial glow. Hours passed in silence. Just as I considered finally retiring, a faint crackle broke the quiet. My muscles tensed reflexively. The familiar, sickening race of my heart began. The radio's dial emitted a weak, spectral light. My palms grew slick. Approaching cautiously, the voices erupted, louder than ever before. A torrent of names I recognized. Friends, colleagues, faces from the periphery of my life. A surge of bile rose in my throat. The voices felt frantic, desperate, as if imparting vital secrets too quickly for comprehension. Kneeling, I pressed my ear closer. A recurring phrase emerged from the chaos. "Come now." Then, a violent burst of static, and silence fell once more. Sleep was unthinkable that night. I paced the confines of my living room, repeatedly checking window latches, the deadbolt on the door. My body remained coiled, braced for an unseen intrusion. Around 4 a.m., I finally succumbed to exhaustion on the couch, waking to sunlight striping the floor through the blinds, neck stiff, back aching. My first glance was towards the kitchen. The radio was dark, rising, showering, forcing down breakfast. I knew I couldn't sustain this state. A decision loomed: destroy the infernal device or capitulate to its demands. Yet every mental image of taking a hammer to it of casting it away, triggered that same debilitating wave of dread. A physical blow, temples throbbing, chest constricting. I called Leo. He possesses a practical knowledge of circuits and wires. Casually, I asked if he'd be interested in a vintage war-era radio. He chuckled, inquiring if it functioned. Yes, I admitted, in a manner of speaking. I confessed it was proving troublesome, that I simply wanted it gone. He offered to drop by, have a look. I agreed, a fragile hope stirring. Perhaps transferring ownership would break the connection. Leo arrived that evening. As I handed the radio over, the volume knob rotated slightly, untouched. A brief, sibilant whisper escaped the speaker. Leo dropped the radio onto the table as if burned, stepping back, his expression bewildered. "What was that?" he stammered. The dam broke. I recounted everything, the words tumbling out, likely incoherent. He looked profoundly uneasy. Maybe, he suggested, there was some hidden mechanism inside, a transmitter or recorder. We procured a screwdriver, attempting to remove the back panel. The screws were fused tight with age and corrosion. One sheared off completely under minimal pressure. Leo shrugged, conceding defeat without better tools. He left the radio sitting there, citing dinner plans, promising to return equipped for a proper investigation. I felt a confusing mixture of disappointment and relief, a part of me terrified of what might be found within its casing. That night, 3 a.m. arrived with chilling punctuality. My name echoed from the kitchen. The names of others I knew followed. Then, a new voice, stark and clear. "You have to come." It repeated the phrase, insistent, hypnotic. The combined voices escalated, reaching an unbearable pitch, the air seeming to vibrate against my skin. My ears rang. Clapping my hands over them offered no respite. Then, abruptly, silence. A distinct click from the radio. It was over, for now. By this point, exhaustion was a physical weight. A persistent throb resided behind my eyes, underscored by dark circles. The desire to obliterate the radio with a sledgehammer was potent, yet intertwined with an unshakable certainty that such an act would invite retribution. Irrational, I knew, but the feeling was absolute, a knot tightening in my gut. I concluded that obedience was the only path left, the only way to perhaps understand, and ultimately escape this nocturnal torment. The following night, I prepared. A heavy jacket, sturdy boots, a flashlight tucked into my pocket. Around 2:30 a.m., keys in hand, I descended to my car. My hands trembled on the wheel, my chest tight with a suffocating anxiety. I navigated the deserted streets toward Maple Street, the beam of my headlight slicing through the pre-dawn gloom, past darkened storefronts and sleeping houses. My gaze flickered constantly to the rearview mirror, anticipating pursuit by shadows. Arriving at the warehouse, an unnerving quiet prevailed. The moon, nearly full, cast long skeletal shadows. The dilapidated fence and its rusty padlock remained undisturbed. Parking across the desolate street, I listened intently. Nothing but the low thrum of the city. Exiting the car, the cool air felt sharp against my face, carrying the scent of damp concrete and stagnant water from nearby puddles. I approached the fence, my heart hammering against my ribs, the sound loud in my own ears. A tentative tug on the gate's chain produced a loud rattling clang that seemed to shatter the silence. That familiar wave of dread surged, the feeling of transgression. but turning back had solved nothing. Scanning the perimeter, I spotted a section near the corner where the chain links were bent and distorted. With some effort, I managed to pry them apart sufficiently to squeeze through, tearing my jacket slightly on a jagged edge. My breath came in ragged gasps. Inside the perimeter, I switched on the flashlight. Up close, the warehouse radiated an even greater sense of decay. Every visible window was shattered, paint peeled like sunburnt skin. I navigated over drifts of broken glass and indeterminate rubbish, my footsteps crunching unnervingly on the gravelly ground. An acute sense of vulnerability washed over me. No voices whispered here, no sign of life. A side door, slightly ajar, beckoned from the shadows. Pushing it open, the hinges screamed in protest. The flashlight beam cut into a vast, cavernous interior, littered with debris, splintered crates, and corroded metal beams. Patches of the concrete floor glistened wetly. Taking hesitant steps forward, I swept the light across the oppressive darkness. My pulse hammered, sweat trickled coldly down my spine. Every nerve ending anticipated the sudden emergence of the voices, or worse, a physical presence. Silence answered my unspoken fear. "Hello?" My voice sounded small, swallowed by the space, echoing back unanswered. I moved deeper, my light playing over the detritus. In a far corner, something resembling a makeshift workbench caught my eye. Drawing closer, my breath hitched. Several broken radios, similar in vintage to my own, lay scattered amidst tangled wires, old headphones, and loose papers. My heart rate accelerated. Had someone else been drawn here? I stepped nearer. The papers were torn, covered in frantic scribbles, frequencies, cryptic notes, indecipherable diagrams. A thorough search yielded nothing more substantial. The place was utterly deserted. A strange mix of relief and profound disappointment settled over me. I had braced for revelation, for terror, perhaps even for confrontation. Instead, only emptiness, decay, and these few enigmatic relics. After lingering perhaps 15 minutes, I retraced my steps, squeezing back through the mangled fence into the pre-dawn chill. My mind raced. Why here? What purpose did this desolate place serve? Had I overlooked some crucial detail? The drive home was fraught with tension, my eyes constantly monitoring the rearview mirror. Upon entering my apartment, I froze. The radio, still unplugged on the kitchen table, was glowing. Its dial pulsed with that familiar, sickly light. My mouth went dry. As I approached, the whispers started again, but their tone had shifted. They sounded angry, accusatory. Though the words remained largely indistinct, the feeling of being scolded was palpable. My stomach clenched. I went there," I said aloud, my voice hoarse. "There was nothing." The voices sputtered, crackled violently for a moment, then ceased. The radio clicked off. Now I exist within this inescapable loop. Each night, precisely at 3 a.m., the radio awakens. The voices persist, sometimes demanding I return to the warehouse, sometimes issuing new, equally cryptic instructions. They chant my name. They invoke the names of people I know, weaving a web of unsettling intimacy. Every time I contemplate disposal, hurling it into a river, smashing it to pieces, the mere thought triggers a debilitating psychic resistance. My mind clouds. A fierce headache blooms. My vision momentarily blurs. I cannot follow through. Leo hasn't heard about these latest developments. The story has spiraled too far beyond the rational for him to comprehend. I live perpetually on edge, suspended in the dread-filled anticipation of those early morning hours when the dial will light up and the chorus of whispers will begin anew. I am subject to their whims, their incomprehensible demands. I don't know what entity, what force resides within that bakelite shell, nor what its ultimate purpose might be. Standing it much longer feels impossible, yet any attempt to formulate an escape, any plan to sever this connection, dissolves into mental chaos and physical revulsion. I am tethered to this thing. Each night I wait. I wait for the frantic susurrus, for the commanding voice telling me to go back, or to do something else. No solution presents itself. No exit appears. All I know with certainty is that with each passing night, the transmissions intensify, and the consequences of continued resistance remain terrifyingly unknown. This piece of earth became mine just last month. Expectations ran low when first spying the weathered for sale placard beside the unpaved track. The dwelling itself is unassuming, clad in a pallid paint peeling like sunburnt skin. Out toward the property's edge, the barn lists slightly, a weary sentinel, yet sound enough for sheltering forgotten things. Remnants of a former life lingered, rusted implements, splintered crates, and a pervasive dust-coating corners I'd yet to disturb. My vision for the place involved quiet evenings, watching the sun bleed behind the undulating hills. A vast cornfield, unfurling beyond the barn, truly snagged my interest. A potential source of modest revenue, I'd reasoned. Yet, something arrested my gaze during that initial trek through the whispering stalks. Dead center in the expanse stood an effigy, a scarecrow. Its attire, though tattered, possessed an unsettling neatness. The jacket collar rested precisely against the straw neck. The trousers refused to sag. The hat perched with an intention that defied randomness. It felt curated, tended. Initially, I dismissed it as a relic, a forgotten sentry from occupants long departed. I strode past it that first day of exploration. It seemed canted forward, its burlap head angled toward the farmhouse. A peculiar coldness coiled in my gut, inexplicable then. Just straw and timber, wasn't it? Its face, faded sacking, revealed stray golden strands poking through. For eyes, black buttons, though one bore a jagged chip, lending it a fractured stare. A crooked line stitched for a mouth. A momentary glance, then I continued my walk. It remained static, inert, a silent fixture. Several nights later found me seeking solace in the modest living room. Windows yawned open to the warm summer air. Through them drifted the sound of wind sighing through the corn. Ordinarily, a tranquil murmur. Tonight it felt altered, imbued with a subtle rhythm, almost a sibilance. No distinct words, just a low, persistent whisper that prickled the skin on my arms. Drawn to the back porch, I surveyed the field. Moonlight, thin and watery, silvered the swaying ranks of corn, and there, amidst them, the silhouette stood starkly visible, the scarecrow's form unmistakable. Squinting, I entertained a fleeting, chilling notion. It had turned, not merely leaned, but pivoted fully toward me. The distance and gloom offered no certainty. I wrestled the feeling down, attributing the quickened pulse, the shallow breaths, to fatigue. Retreating inside, I secured the door, reminding myself, a bundle of old cloth, straw lashed to a wooden spine. Sleep eventually claimed me on the couch. Morning summoned me outdoors to inspect the field before a necessary trip to town. My boots crunched on the dry earth between the rows. Reaching the center, I confronted the figure again, but dissonance hummed in the air. Its hat now tilted acutely to one side, as if taking aim directly at my approach. The arm seemed drawn closer to its torso, a subtle shift in posture. A bead of sweat traced my temple despite the moderate morning air. Hesitantly, I reached out, my fingers brushing the dusty fabric of its jacket. The sleeve stitching felt frail. I examined the post, the bindings, nothing overtly loose. Then I saw them, footprints etched into the soil around its base. Not my own, these were smaller, scuff marks suggesting dragging feet. They led away from the sentinel of straw, vanishing abruptly where the corn grew thickest. A wave of nausea washed over me. The wind? Local youths playing tricks? Yet no children had been seen, no intruders heard. In town, procuring basic supplies, I exchanged pleasantries with a few locals. The property, they confirmed, had stood vacant for 2 decades or more. No one volunteered tales of scarecrows or uncanny footprints. I held my tongue, unwilling to be branded paranoid within my first week. Evening painted the sky in hues of orange and rose as I sat once more on the porch. Insectile churring filled the twilight air, mingling with the dry scent of corn husks. A pull urged me toward the field, toward the silent watcher, but I resisted, resolving to wait for daylight. The memory of those footprints gnawed, making a nocturnal foray unappealing. Around 10, the house secured, I retired, leaving a window slightly ajar. Sleep, I hoped, would be uninterrupted, but midnight brought awakening. A distant rustling, more insistent than before, disturbed the quiet. Rising, I peered out. The moon, brighter now, cast long shadows across the yard. Beyond the initial rows of corn, visibility faded, but then came a soft thud, the impact of something heavy meeting earth. My heart hammered, flashlight in hand, boots hastily pulled on, I stepped onto the porch. The night air felt dense, charged. My legs were taut, breath unsteady. The flashlight beam sliced into the field's edge. The nearest stalks swayed, their movement too vigorous for mere wind, suggesting passage. "Hello?" I called out, my voice thin, quavering. "Anyone there?" Silence answered, save for a sudden gust that roared through the corn, amplifying the rustling. I stood frozen, indecisive. Then a flicker of rapid movement near the center, a shape shifting, spinning almost. The scarecrow's silhouette seemed to jerk sideways. My chest constricted. Straining to hear above the wind and my own pulse, I caught a faint murmur, unintelligible. The hand gripping the flashlight began to tremble. Abruptly, stillness fell, broken only by the ragged sound of my breathing. I retreated, locking the door firmly behind me, and spent the remainder of the night slumped in a kitchen chair, eyes fixed on the barrier between me and the field. Dawn's first tentative light found me stiff-limbed and bleary-eyed. Outside, dew glistened on the corn leaves under a cool morning sky. I marched directly to the center of the field. The scarecrow seemed taller, perhaps an illusion of the nascent light. Its hat, undeniably, was angled toward me. The arms hung strangely, pulled downwards, and straw bristled from rents in its torso, as if burst from within. The earth surrounding the post was freshly disturbed by shallow, dragging marks. Crouching, I touched one. Its origin remained obscure. Scanning the vicinity yielded nothing further. My heart felt like a lead weight. I couldn't tear my gaze from the effigy's face. The stitches forming its mouth seemed looser, gaping slightly. With a disquieted shake of my head, I turned back to the house. The day was dedicated to distraction, clearing the barn, stacking old hay, sorting the inherited tools. Hours of physical labor kept the unease at bay, until late afternoon, shadows began to stretch, reminding me that night and its potential terrors loomed. A knot tightened in my stomach, recalling the flashlight's tremor in my grasp. I resolved to check the field once more before sunset, seeking reassurance in the daylight. Walking out with determined strides, I fought for composure. The sun, still high, slanted through the towering stalks. Upon reaching the center, I froze. The scarecrow pitched forward precariously, almost detached from its support, arms outstretched as if reaching. Fabric gaped at the shoulders. The rope binding it remained, but hung slack. Fresh straw littered the ground beneath it. My throat constricted. Circling warily, maintaining distance, I observed long tears, almost surgical cuts, marring the fabric on its back. This wasn't decay. It felt deliberate. Straw protruded haphazardly. The thrumming of my own blood filled my ears. Sweat trickled down my spine. The urge to dismantle it, tear it down, warred with a deeper caution. Would that provoke something worse? The notion of a vagrant, a nocturnal prankster, seemed the more rational explanation, however unsettling. It had to be human interference. Resolved, I strode back to the barn, returning with sturdy rope. I lashed the figure tightly to the post, cinching its torso and arms, reinforcing the original bonds until the wood groaned under the strain. Stepping back, a sliver of relief surfaced, a sense of regained control. A hollow laugh escaped me. Night descended once more. The porch light blazed defiantly. Flashlight and hammer lay ready by the back door, preparedness against the unknown. Windows sealed, doors double-checked. Around 9, the wind rose. I tensed, anticipating the rustling. It began softly, familiarly, then escalated. The porch light flickered erratically. Listening intently, I detected a scraping noise, something dragging across the earth out there. Pressure built in my chest. Stay calm. Moving to the window, I peered through the glass. Cornstalks bowed and swayed. The scarecrow's position, deep within the field, was obscured from this angle. I swallowed, my pulse rapid but steady. Then, the thud returned, identical to the night before. Flashlight gripped tight, I eased onto the porch, leaving the door ajar. My boots echoed on the aged planks. The beam cut a path into the darkness. Corn rustled invasively on either side, limiting sight to mere feet ahead. My mouth was parched, every muscle coiled. A faint creaking reached me, the sound of rope under strain. Slowly, I swept the light across the rows. Movement, peripheral, to my left. I snapped the beam that way. Only swaying stalks met the light. Then, deeper in, I glimpsed the scarecrow's post. Empty. The figure was not upon it. A severed rope dangled, swaying gently, trailing wisps of straw. Ice traced my veins. 20 feet away, obscured by stalks, a shape crouched low. Indistinct in the gloom, it shifted behind the corn. I edged forward, step by hesitant step. Wind howled, my heartbeat pounded in my temples. My foot caught on unseen debris. I stumbled, the flashlight beam dancing wildly. When I regained balance, focused the light again, there was nothing but the restless corn. The dangling rope hung still. The urge to flee screamed, but I held my ground, sweeping the light back and forth. The shape was gone. My hands shook uncontrollably. "Who's there?" I whispered, the sound cracking. Only the wind replied. Slowly, deliberately, I backed away, light trained on the field. Once in the yard, I spun and hurried inside, slamming the door shut. Breath came in ragged gasps, hands slick with sweat, legs trembling. I locked the door, extinguished the lights, and took up a vigil at a window overlooking the field, concealed behind the curtain. Mostly, the corn stood quiet, stirred only by intermittent gusts. The post remained starkly vacant. Hours crawled by. Occasional movements flickered at the edge of vision. Wind or something else. My lungs felt tight, my mind churning. Sleep offered no refuge. I sat in the living room, flashlight clutched, ears straining against the house's familiar groans, each one jolting me. As dawn painted the sky, I returned to the window. The field appeared ordinary in the pale light. With unsteady steps, I ventured outside. The central post stood bare. Scraps of burlap lay scattered on the ground. The severed rope rested nearby. Straw clung like morbid decorations to the corn leaves. The scarecrow had vanished. All that remained were these fragments and the old hat lying in the dirt, a fresh tear marring its brim. Bending, I picked it up. A musty odor rose from the damp straw within. It felt wrong in my hand. No clear footprints remained, only disturbed earth, suggesting something heavy had been dragged away. I remain here, tending this land, but vigilance is now my constant companion. The rest of the scarecrow was never found. Whether stolen by human hands or departed of its own volition, I cannot say. The noises, the shifting form, the footprints, they defy easy explanation. Trespassers? Pranksters? Perhaps, but nothing else has been disturbed, no one sighted. The image persists, that low, crouched shape amidst the corn, watching. Nights are forbidden territory now. The field remains untrodden after dusk. The rustle of wind through the stalks is no longer peaceful. It's a trigger, tightening my chest, quickening my pulse. Sometimes, standing on the porch, I scan the rows, half expecting to see it return. Not yet, but the tension never fully leaves my gut. I don't know what resides out there, and I have no intention of seeking it in the darkness. Should it come back, I suppose I will face it. Until then, I live with the echo of that absence. The frayed rope, the tattered cloth, and the empty space where a sentinel of straw once stood guard in my field. Tuesday delivered the first tremor, innocuous on its surface. Elias Thorne sifted through the morning's post at his sun-drenched kitchen table, the ritual punctuated by the comforting aroma of dark roast coffee. Bills, circulars, the usual detritus, then something different. A postcard, starkly simple. A vista of anonymous mountains, peaks shrouded in mist, utterly unfamiliar. He nearly consigned it to the recycling pile, a generic offering amidst the noise. Curiosity, however, stayed his hand. He flipped it. Neat, looping script, entirely unknown, addressed him by name. Trust the morning constitutional did you good, Elias. Those crimson trainers have flair. A chill traced its way up his spine, displacing the coffee's warmth. He had indeed pounded the pavement earlier, his favorite crimson shoes a blur against the asphalt. But this, the postmark originated 3 states distant, stamped nearly a week prior. How? He labeled it coincidence, a bizarre misdelivery, yet the explanation felt thin, unsatisfying. Tucking the card into a desk drawer, out of sight, not quite out of mind, failed to dispel the unease. A subtle paranoia took root. Through the remainder of the day, Elias found his gaze drifting, searching crowds for an attentive stare, listening for footsteps that matched his own. Absurd, he chided himself. Just a stray piece of mail. A week trickled by, the initial disquiet fading into the background hum of daily life. He'd almost managed to bury the incident. Then, the second postcard materialized. This depicted a charming, unknown bistro, cobblestones gleaming under lamplight. With fingers that betrayed a sudden tremor, he turned it over. Heard the quarterly report landed well. Cobalt is certainly your hue. Ice water seemed to flood his veins. That very morning, he'd navigated a high-stakes presentation, fortified by his supposed lucky cobalt tie. Coincidence strained credulity now, snapping under the weight. He scrutinized the card, seeking any imperfection, any clue. Another city, another postmark days old, knowledge dispatched before the fact. Impossible. The weeks that followed brought a steady, unnerving trickle. Postcards materialized like clockwork, each bearing a different, picturesque scene. Sun-drenched beaches, quaint village squares, autumnal forests. None places Elias had ever visited. And every message, penned in that same precise hand, divulged another fragment of his private existence. The new shear suits you. Suspect that row with Isabel was draining. Kin can be intricate. Mind that strained ligament, perhaps forego tomorrow's jog. Each card, a dispatch from a different location, invariably postmarked days before the event it described. It was less observation, more unnerving prophecy, his life narrated by an unseen, clairvoyant correspondent. Obsession took hold. Elias pinned the cards to a corkboard, a constellation of cryptic messages and generic landscapes. He hunted for patterns, connections, some thread linking the disparate locations gleaned from frantic online searches, all tourist traps, devoid of personal significance. He began deliberately altering his routines, embracing spontaneity, taking unexpected turns, hoping to wrong-foot this invisible chronicler. The effort proved futile. The postcards adapted, anticipated. Commendable detour attempt. The Arboretum is rather splendid this season, no? Sleep became a luxury Elias could no longer afford. Leaving his apartment felt like stepping onto a stage, floodlights tracking his every move. Each face in the street became suspect. The barista pulling his espresso, the quiet neighbor down the hall, a forgotten adversary nursing some ancient grudge. He sought help from the authorities, presenting his collection of predictive mail. They offered sympathy, but little else. Without overt threats, their hands were tied. Relocate your mailbox, they suggested, a solution that felt laughably inadequate against such pervasive knowledge. Desperation led him to Ms. Vance, a private investigator whose initial skepticism evaporated as the postcards continued their eerily accurate commentary on Elias's life. This is unprecedented, she conceded one afternoon, her gaze sweeping over the cards spread like tarot across her polished desk. It's as if they're watching you from next week. Defies logic. They implemented countermeasures, surveillance cameras bristling around his apartment, mail rerouted, even a temporary relocation to a friend's house across the state. Nothing stemmed the flow. The postcards unerringly found him. The messages sharpened, burrowing deeper beneath his skin. You ought to ring your mother, Elias. She worries. That eczema looks bothersome. Have you tried calendula cream? Then, chillingly, I perceive your fear. It is appropriate. That one fractured his remaining composure. He withdrew, severing ties with work, with friends. His world contracted to the four walls of his apartment, curtains perpetually drawn, every creak and groan of the building amplifying his dread. Still, the postcards came, now slipped silently beneath his door. Sanctuary is an illusion, one declared. Discovery is inevitable. He existed as a prisoner of his own life, haunted by missives from an omniscient persecutor. How could one combat an adversary who operated outside the known rules of time and space? Months bled together in a gray fog of anxiety. His job vanished, relationships withered. His universe shrank to the terrifying limbo between his front door and the floor beneath it, where each new postcard lay waiting, retrieved with hands that shook uncontrollably. Then, one bleak Wednesday morning, the pattern deviated. Not a postcard, but a letter. A crisp, white envelope lay on the doormat, his name inscribed in that dreadfully familiar script. Ilya stared at it for a long, suspended moment, fear warring with a desperate need for resolution. What new torment lay folded within? Curiosity, sharp and insistent, finally conquered apprehension. He tore it open. Inside, a single sheet of heavy paper. As he unfolded it, something small and metallic tumbled out. A key. He snatched it up, its cool weight alien in his palm, as his eyes devoured the words. Your questions must be legion by now. Answers await. This key unlocks locker vol.41 at the central terminus. Midnight tonight. Attend alone, or the truth remains forever veiled. He reread the lines countless times, his thoughts a chaotic storm. This was it, the confrontation, the potential end to the torment, the unveiling of the why. Yet the scent of a trap hung heavy in the air. Ultimately, the gnawing need for understanding eclipsed his fear. As midnight tolled across the city, Elias stood within the echoing expanse of the deserted train station, the small key clutched tight. Locker number 412 was easily located amidst the silent ranks. His fingers fumbled with the lock, half braced for detonation, for ambush. The door swung inward with a quiet click, revealing not danger, but a small, leather-bound journal. He lifted it out, opened it. The script mirrored the postcards exactly. His breath hitched. This wasn't merely a diary, it was his. Page after page detailed his own thoughts, his experiences, his reactions, events yet to unfold, moments still lying dormant in the future. The final entry bore a date 5 years hence. It chronicled with chilling clarity his own discovery of temporal displacement, his subsequent attempts to guide his younger self, to prepare him by sending messages back through time. The world tilted, reality warping around him. It was madness, utterly impossible, and yet it explained everything. The prescient knowledge, the postmarks that defied chronology. He had been stalking himself. As Elias stood there, journal pressed against his chest like a shield, a figure coalesced from the station's deep shadows. Recognition dawned even before the light fully illuminated the face. It was him, older, lines etched deeper by time and worry, but undeniably Elias Thorne. "Forgive me," his future counterpart murmured, the voice thick with a sorrow that spanned years. "I believed I was aiding you, buffering the shocks to come. I see now, I only cultivated terror." "Why?" The word tore from Elias's throat, raw and ragged. "Why inflict this?" The older Elias, he, sighed, a sound heavy with the weight of accumulated time. "To avert a catastrophe, an event that irrevocably alters our world. But I comprehended too late. Striving to rewrite the past, I was merely cementing the very future I sought to prevent." They spoke for hours in the hollow silence of the station, the older Elias recounting the years ahead, breakthroughs and devastating losses, a world teetering on the precipice. "What happens now?" Elias asked, as the first tentative fingers of dawn painted the high station windows gray. "Now," the future Elias replied, his gaze distant. "We allow events to proceed unguided. No more messages, no further interference. Que sera, sera." And with a final, lingering look of profound regret, he turned and dissolved back into the shadows, leaving Elias alone with the journal, his mind fractured by impossible truths. To claim life returned to normalcy would be a falsehood. How could it, after glimpsing a potential future, after conversing with a haunted iteration of himself? The postcard ceased, as promised, but the encounter left an indelible scar. Elias moved through his days with a heightened, almost painful awareness, each decision weighed against the spectral knowledge he now possessed, wondering if it steered him toward or away from the weary figure in the train station. The temptation to incinerate the journal, to obliterate the foreknowledge and reclaim blissful ignorance, often surfaced. Yet he couldn't. It remained a tangible reminder of time's precarious nature, the profound gravity of choice, and the perilous folly of attempting to outmaneuver destiny. And sometimes, passing a carousel of postcards in a shop window, a familiar chill would snake down his spine, accompanied by a single unsettling thought. Is this where it begins? A solitary flake, ghost white against the bruised twilight, pirouetted past the cabin pane, prelude to the deluge. Its descent into the deepening gloom mirrored the knot forming low in my gut. What had begun as a restorative escape for my family was curdling, twisting into something ominous. 3 days prior, we'd arrived. Clara, my wife, our adolescent children, Leo and Maya, and myself, Elias. The forecast whispered of snow, a mere confectioner's dustant promised, enough to enhance the alpine charm, nothing more. Provisions laid in, groceries, diversions for long evenings, cocoa for warmth. We anticipated a week of reconnection, bridging the chasms carved by hectic lives and the volatile moods of youth. And the first 48 hours, pure idyll. We traced trails through silent woods, sculpted ephemeral figures from early drifts, gathered hearthside as flames danced, sharing laughter that felt blessedly genuine after months of fractured communication. We were knitting ourselves back together, thread by fragile thread. But the third dawn broke differently. A leaden weight pressed down from the heavens. The wind, previously a murmur, found its voice, keening around the cabin's sturdy bones. Mid-afternoon saw the snowfall commence in earnest, not gentle flakes, but thick, frantic clots tumbling from an inexhaustible grey. Initially, a thrill ran through us, a true winter wonderland unfurling outside. Yet, as hours bled into one another and the blizzard intensified, excitement soured into apprehension. "Perhaps," Clara ventured, her gaze fixed on the swirling vortex beyond the glass, the accumulation already alarming, "we should consider returning to town." I countered, shaking my head. "The roads will be impassable now. Far safer to ride it out here." Leo, embodying teenage certitude, offered an eye roll. "Chill, Mom. It's just snow. We're stocked. Got the generator if the lights go. Could be an adventure." If only foresight had illuminated the naivety of that sentiment. The tempest howled through the night. Windows rattled in their frames, besieged by wind and driven snow that piled relentlessly against the log walls. Morning revealed a landscape utterly transformed, suffocated in white. Our cabin sat islanded in a vast, undulating sea of snow, drifts sculpted high against its flanks. The car, a formless hump buried deep in the driveway's embrace. "Whoa!" Maya breathed, her exhalation misting the window pane as she surveyed the blinding expanse. I pitched my voice towards calm, masking the tremor of unease for the children's sake. "Looks like we're snowbound for a bit. Lucky we brought plenty of supplies, right?" Clara met my gaze, worry etched deep in her eyes, but she played along with a strained nod. "Exactly. We'll just have a cozy few days indoors until the plows break through." Yet, as the day unfolded, the ordinariness of the storm evaporated. Crackling radio transmissions spoke of unprecedented snowfall, highways sealed, emergency services paralyzed. We were utterly, unequivocally marooned. At first, we adapted. Board games emerged. Books were cracked open. The small kitchen became a hub of shared culinary efforts. But time, measured now in the storm's relentless rhythm, began to erode our composure. Day 2 saw the power grid surrender. The lights flickered, then died. The generator roared to life, a sputtering reassurance, but its fuel was finite, demanding careful rationing. A penetrating chill seeped into the cabin, our breath pluming in the air as we huddled beneath blankets. The larder, once seemingly bountiful for a week's holiday, now appeared terrifyingly finite for an indefinite siege. Portions shrank. Meals became calculated acts of preservation. The physical discomforts, however, were rivaled by the psychological abrasion. Constant proximity grated. Privacy vanished. The gnawing uncertainty of rescue frayed every nerve. Leo and Maya, initially buoyed by the novelty, descended into sullen irritability, their exchanges sharp-edged, squabbling over trifles. The last biscuit, the chore of fetching firewood. Clara retreated inwards, becoming muted, spending long stretches gazing vacantly at the monotonous white vista. I found her weeping soundlessly in the bathroom one night. My attempt at comfort was met with a silent rebuff. And I bore the suffocating weight of assumed leadership, the expectation of solutions. Each passing day without deliverance amplified my own gnawing helplessness. It was the dawn of the 5th day when the fragile facade truly fractured. I woke before the others, the world outside rendered in pale, diffused light filtering through snow-caked windows. Silence reigned. Drawn to the kitchen, intending to inventory our dwindling reserves, a faint sound arrested me, a delicate scratching, seemingly from the vicinity of the main door. Hope surged, sharp and painful. Rescuers! Heart hammering, I wrestled with the latch, pulling the heavy door inward, only to be confronted by an unyielding wall of white. The drift had sealed us in completely. A curse escaped me, low and bitter. The sound must have carried, for stirring came from the bedrooms. "Dad?" Leo's voice thick with sleep. "What is it?" I turned, finding my son silhouetted in the hallway, hair askew, eyes narrowed against the gloom. "Nothing," I lied, forcing buoyancy I didn't feel. "Just checking the door. Go back to bed." But his gaze drifted past me, fixing on something over my shoulder. His face lost its color. "Dad," he uttered, the words stretched thin. "The cupboard." I pivoted, following his stare. The cupboard door, left ajar in my rush, framed the shelves where our remaining sustenance should have been. They were starkly, impossibly bare. Comprehension lagged. Just last night, there had been provisions for several more days. Tins, dried grains, cereal. It couldn't simply evaporate. "What the hell?" I breathed, stepping closer, disbelief warring with the evidence before my eyes. Clara and Maya materialized then, drawn by the tension thickening the air. "Elias!" Clara's voice was strung taut, vibrating with nascent panic. "What's wrong?" I faced them, my family, their anxious features illuminated by the weak morning light. How could I articulate this latest blow? That our lifeline, the very means of enduring this frozen purgatory, had vanished while we slept. "Someone's been in here," I stated finally, the words tasting like ash. "The food, it's gone." A chasm of silence opened, vast and echoing. Then chaos erupted, voices overlapping. "Someone? How?" cried Maya. "Impossible," Clara insisted, shaking her head vehemently. "We'd have heard." But it was Leo's reaction that sent ice sluicing through my veins. He stood mute, a mask of guilt settling over his features, his eyes refusing to meet mine. "Leo," I said, my voice dangerously quiet, "do you know something about this?" He flinched, gaze fixed on the floorboards. Maybe I took a bit extra last night. I was starving and..." "A bit extra?" The words exploded from me. "Leo, it's all gone. Everything." The ensuing argument was corrosive. Accusations ricocheted, voices escalated. Clara sprang to Leo's defense. Maya aligned with my fury. The precarious unity forged in shared adversity disintegrated like frost under a harsh sun. As the shouting reached its zenith, a new sound intruded, deep and guttural, a low rumble, swelling rapidly in intensity. We froze, exchanging wide-eyed, fearful glances. The cabin itself trembled, snow cascading from the roof in a muffled avalanche of sound. For a terrifying heartbeat, I envisioned the entire structure imploding around us. When the vibration ceased, the ensuing silence was profound, ringing in our ears. Hesitantly, drawn by a morbid curiosity, we approached the windows. Outside, the landscape had undergone another violent revision. where pristine white had stretched unbroken, now jagged fissures spiderwebbed across the snowpack. In places, the surface had collapsed entirely, revealing dark, gaping maws beneath. An avalanche. Absorbed in our internal strife, we'd been oblivious to the greater menace gathering just beyond our walls. Standing there, staring at the fractured, treacherous world, I sensed a palpable shift within the cabin's confines. The anger, the blame, the bitter words spoken moments before suddenly felt insignificant, dwarfed by this raw display of nature's power. "What do we do now?" Maya whispered, her voice fragile, laced with fear. My gaze swept over them. Clara's drained pallor, Leo's downcast, guilt-ridden eyes, Maya's trembling lip. Despite it all, the cold, the hunger, the crushing uncertainty, the betrayals small and large, a fierce, protective love surged within me. "We stay together," I declared, the words imbued with a conviction I willed myself to feel. "We've endured this much. We find a way through." And as we drew closer, an involuntary huddle against the howling wind outside, and the dangers lurking both within our strained family and without in the unstable snows, I understood. Our true ordeal was only just commencing. The storm had merely imprisoned us. Our own choices, our capacity for forgiveness and resilience, would dictate our survival, not just of the body, but of the bonds between us. The food was gone, the mountain groaned, and isolation pressed in heavier than ever. But we had each other. In that stark moment, I swore that would have to be enough. It simply had to be. 3 days adrift in the fog of Ilara's vanishing, the impossible pinged into existence. I was submerged in the sterile quiet of the precinct waiting room, a husk hollowed out by exhaustion, when the vibration jolted my phone against my thigh. A simple message. "I'm all right, don't fret." Not the sentiment, but the origin froze the marrow in my bones. It pulsed from Ilara's number, the very device the constabulary assured me lay shattered near her forsaken vehicle. My gaze locked onto the illuminated screen, fingers trembling. An illusion, surely. Ilara had dissolved into thin air driving back from the studio. Her car, discovered idling on a desolate ribbon of asphalt, driver's side door agape, ignition key turned. No scuffle etched into the dust, no violence whispered by the scene. Only the abandoned metal shell and a fractured phone. And now, this spectral communication. "Everything satisfactory, Mr. Thorne." Inspector Davies's clipped tone sliced through my stupor. I looked up. Her sharp eyes were assessing me, laced with a practiced concern. A dry swallow scraped my throat. "A text," I managed, the words feeling thick and alien. "It's from Ilara's number." Davies's eyebrows arched towards her hairline. She extended a hand, palm up. Reluctantly, I surrendered my phone. Her focus narrowed, lips thinning as she absorbed the impossible words. "Inconceivable," she breathed, almost to herself. Her handset is secured in evidence. Yet the message glowed undeniable, a digital whisper from the abyss. What ensued was a controlled chaos, tracing protocols initiated, hitting immediate dead ends. Questions, circling back on themselves, probed my involvement in this grotesque theater, though my bewilderment mirrored their own. Then, the phantom signals persisted, each a fresh torment. Thinking of you. Such darkness surrounds me. Finian, find me. Every syllable drove an icy spike deeper into my psyche, leaving behind a residue of terror and gnawing uncertainty. The police apparatus ground against the inexplicable. My phone became a monitored artifact, traces deployed, every conceivable avenue explored, yet the messages materialized, untraceable specters tethered to Ilara's defunct number. Sleep became a forgotten country. Appetite vanished. Existence contracted to the dimensions of my phone screen, awaiting the next cryptic dispatch that arrived without pattern, day or night. Each buzz became a Pavlovian trigger, a knot of dread tightening even as a desperate filament of hope flared. A week after the initial transmission, a directive arrived that shifted the world on its axis. Meet me where sunlight first dappled our joined hands. Midnight. Come unaccompanied. The location resonated instantly. Beneath the sprawling limbs of the ancient sentinel oak in Ashworth Park, the site of our first shared vulnerability. My pulse hammered against my ribs, rereading the words, etching them onto my soul. This felt pivotal, a chance, however slim, to reclaim Ilara, to pull her back from the void. The police? I withheld this. Their caution would stifle the chance. Their presence might frighten away the puppeteer pulling these cruel strings. This path, I knew instinctively, I had to tread alone. As midnight breathed down the neck of the day, I navigated the familiar paths toward the park. The air hung cool and crystalline. A bloated moon bled silver light, sculpting long, dancing phantoms from the deserted landscape. Ahead, the old oak clawed at the star-dusted heavens, its gnarled silhouette immense and waiting. I advanced with stealth, senses straining, scanning the periphery for Ilara, for anyone. Silence answered, thick and absolute. Ilara? My voice, a fragile thread in the stillness. Are you here? Nothing. A glance at my watch, 1 minute past the appointed hour. My pocket vibrated, a physical shock. Tremors ran through my hand as I drew out the phone. Look skyward. My breath hitched. Slowly, reluctantly, I tilted my head back, tracing the dark architecture of the branches above. And there it was, dangling from a low-hanging bough, like some macabre fruit. A phone. Ilara's phone, the one supposedly catalogued and broken in an evidence locker. Reaching, I half expected my fingers to pass through air, but the object was solid, chillingly real beneath my touch. The screen, though webbed with cracks, flared to life with fresh text. Behind you. I spun, heart convulsing, a violent drum against my ribs. Empty parkland stretched away, bathed in the moon's spectral wash. Another vibration against my palm. I looked down. Not there. Here. The words fractured logic. I pivoted again, desperation clawing at my throat, seeking Ilara, seeking sense in the encroaching madness. That's when perception snagged on a shape detaching itself from the tree line's deepest shadows. Too obscure for features, yet an inexplicable certainty surged. It was her. Ilara! The name tore from me as I surged forward. Ilara, is it truly you? The figure remained static, unresponsive. Closer now, a dissonant chord struck within me. The proportions felt wrong. The head seemed swollen, the arms unnaturally elongated, like limbs stretched on a rack. My forward momentum faltered, confusion and a primal fear wrestling for dominance. Ilara? I tried again, the name barely a whisper. Its head snapped upward at an angle that defied anatomy, and then it smiled, a horrifying rictus that split the face into a grotesque crescent, revealing multiple rows of needle-sharp gleaming teeth. I recoiled, stumbling backward, a scream strangling itself in my throat. This thing. It wore a vague resemblance, but it wasn't Ilara. It wasn't human. My heel caught a root, sending me crashing to the earth, the impact expelling the air from my lungs in a ragged gasp. And then I heard it, a sound forever seared into my memory. Laughter, high-pitched, glacial, and utterly devoid of human mirth. I scrambled upright, fueled by pure adrenaline, and fled, bolted faster than I knew possible. Behind me, the thing gave chase, its terrible, alien laughter echoing, gaining. Bursting from the park's edge onto the asphalt, lungs scorching, legs churning relentlessly, I didn't pause until the sanctuary of my apartment door slammed shut behind me. I collapsed against the wood, shaking violently, every nerve ending screaming. For hours I remained there, a prisoner in my own home, flinching at every creak, convinced the creature lingered just outside, patient and predatory. When the fragile light of dawn finally bled through the blinds, I contacted Inspector Davies, spilling the night's horrors in a torrent of frantic words. She listened, her voice measured, patient, yet tinged with an unmistakable skepticism. A subsequent search of Ashworth Park yielded nothing. No unusual tracks, no monstrous entity, no trace of Ilara. The phone I'd clutched, wrenched from the oak's limb, vanished as inexplicably as it had appeared. Mr. Thorne, Davies suggested, her tone softening into therapeutic concern. Perhaps you should consider speaking with a professional. The strain of Ilara's disappearance. I'm not delusional, I retorted, the words sharp with desperation. I know what I encountered. But even as the denial left my lips, insidious doubt began to bloom. Had my grief-stricken mind conjured the entire nightmare? Was the pressure finally fracturing my sanity? That evening, lying rigid in bed, staring into the oppressive darkness overhead, my phone emitted one final, fateful buzz. A profound sense of doom washed over me as I reached for it. A picture message from Ilara's number. My thumb hovered above the notification, trembling. Could I bear to look? Drawing a ragged breath, I tapped the screen. The image resolved, and the floor seemed to fall away beneath me. It was a selfie. Ilara, radiant, beaming into the lens. But captured in the mirrored surface behind her stood the creature from the park. Its grotesque smile seemed aimed directly at me, a predatory leer, as one of its impossibly long, malformed arms draped possessively over Ilara's shoulder. Below the image, a caption, "See you soon, Finian." Sleep is a luxury I no longer afford myself. My phone rests shattered at the bottom of a distant dumpster. The landline is disconnected. Every mirror in my apartment is shrouded in cloth. Futile gestures, I know. It's merely biding its time before it comes for me. Sometimes, in the dead stillness of night, I hear it. The phantom chime of my discarded phone, playing Ilara's ringtone, and sometimes catching an unexpected reflection in a darkened window pane or a rain-slicked street. I see it. That inhuman grin, those teeth, those watchful eyes superimposed over my own features. What became of Ilara, I cannot say. What that entity is, or its desires, remain terrifying unknowns. I only know it's out there, observing, waiting, and its patience will eventually run thin. So, should you ever receive a message from a number long silent, from someone presumed lost, do not reply. Do not agree to meet. And whatever you value, never ever look behind you. Because sometimes the one you yearn to save is already irretrievably gone, and the thing that has found you is something infinitely worse.